A Japanese friend once told me that the reason why Tokyo people are all kind of aloof and cold is because most everyone living in Tokyo is not from Tokyo. They've moved there from somewhere else, and therefore they are trying their hardest to do the most mainline, normal Japanese behavior, leaving the culture of their village behind or their town behind. And so that's why you end up with this culture of Tokyo that's kind of cool and dispassionate, which I believe does not really describe the Japanese character. What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul. I make videos about Japanese society, life, and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I just celebrated my 22nd anniversary of first landing in Japan. I came to Japan, touched down at Narita Airport on July 27th, 2002. Now, if you think about it, that math doesn't line up. I have been here only for still less than 20 years total, but that's because I went back to the US for grad school for a couple of years. Now, when I arrived back in July of 2002, I didn't know what I was in for. I didn't know much about Japan at all. I actually came to Japan because I wanted to have the opportunity to live abroad somewhere. And it was never really about Japan itself. It was after being here and being accepted into the community where I lived, making some excellent friendships, feeling like I was a part of something out in that countryside town, and the reading that I did and the traveling that I did that actually started the whole love affair with Japan and Japanese culture. Today's topic, as you've deduced from the title, I'm going to be talking about the death of Japanese culture, but I need to define what it is that I'm actually going to be talking about, because that could be a number of different things. I'm going to start off by briefly telling you three things that it is not. Now, the first thing I'm not going to be talking about is the death of the really old Japanese culture, things like kabuki, or using traditional farm tools to grow rice, etc. Basically things that modernity has killed. Obviously, Japan is a modern, developed country, so it's not surprising that the youth are going to choose to go see the newest Deadpool Wolverine movie rather than go watch kabuki, right? So that's not what I'm going to be talking about. The second thing I'm not going to be talking about, and this is based on a lot of comments that I've gotten on several of my videos, that people seem to think that foreign immigration is going to be killing Japanese culture and is changing Japan irreparably. But I'm not going to be talking about that in this video. That could maybe be a discussion for another day. But honestly, in my mind, in many ways, that ship has sailed, if you think about it. Basically, it was Americans showing up in the 19th century that opened Japan to trade and the West, that ended the 300-year-old shogun military dictatorship and changed Japan irreparably then. And then the Americans showed up again in 1945 and rewrote the Constitution and basically told Japan, well, you can't have this state religion and the emperor's not God and da-da-da-da-da. And I think a lot of people wouldn't be arguing that they want to return to that particular version of Japanese culture. And I'm not going to be talking about the over-tourism issue. Some people seem to think that that's going to be ruining Japanese culture in some way. Honestly, though, I think it's actually the opposite, because a lot of tourists come here wanting to experience the old and the traditional, so they're helping keep local craftsmen employed by taking their classes on how to make things and buying local crafts and going to cooking lessons to make sushi and tamagoyaki, the Japanese-style omelet. So I think there's a lot of traditional things that are being kept alive by the tourist industry, which is a good thing in my mind. Now, what am I actually addressing in this video? What do I mean when I say that Japanese culture is dying? I think it's because I lived out in the countryside all those years ago and fell in love with that part of Japan. That is part of why this issue is something really passionate for me, and that is, I want to talk about the death of the Japanese countryside and what that is being replaced by. You see, Japan has the famously low birth rate, aging society, and there's towns and villages all across the country that are disappearing. What does that mean? First of all, obviously, that means that everything that is in the cultural and community memory of that place disappears. the history of that place, the culture of that place. We're talking like local dialects, the types of words and phrases that people use, gone forever. Local recipes, the restaurants and cafes that would have existed there serving food, those are gone forever. Other things that are gone forever are the local festivals and events that would have been held. Everything from your local summer festival of like carrying the mikoshi related with Japanese Shinto to the festivals of the local schools holding their sports days and culture day events, etc. All gone forever. And the uniqueness of these places can't be replaced. For me, this is an incredibly sad thing. Something that I wish Japan was able to reverse in some way. And we'll get into some hopeful signs at the end of the video. But for the meantime, we've got these towns and villages that are disappearing. The young people all move away, and the elderly eventually pass away. And we are actually soon to come into the Obon season in Japan, where people traditionally go back to the home that they grew up in, and they clean the local grave sites of their ancestors and pray to them and welcome them back into their lives, essentially. But more and more people don't have a place to go back to. Like, the grandparents have passed away, there isn't a home there anymore. Hey, sorry for the weird cut. There was something I forgot to say that I wanted to say about Obon when I was talking about it before, and I just remembered it now at the end of the filming of my video, so I want to add this in. And that is, Obon is a really strong representation of cultures that are unique to different areas and how they are also dying out. One of my favorite writers about Japan, Donald Ritchie, wrote in a book called Japanese Portraits about the Obon tradition that he witnessed in the early 50s in Chiba Prefecture, where he saw these boys on the beach who had dug these holes that they were sleeping in until the dawn broke. And as the sun rose, the boys woke up and gathered down by the water and were looking at the sunrise. And Donald Ritchie asked one of the boys, you know, what are you guys doing? What is this all about? And the boy said that, oh, we're here to greet our ancestors with the sunrise. And then we lead them home. We bring them back to their home. And that culture, that's gone. And Obon cultures like that all over Japan are disappearing as well. So even though the people live on in Tokyo or wherever else, the place where they came from, all these ideas and traditions and customs have disappeared or are disappearing as we speak. Okay, again, sorry for the weird cut. Let's go back to where we were. Everyone's moved to the larger metropolitan areas. And that's essentially what I feel is one of the biggest problems in Japan today, is that flight to the metropolitan areas. So the birth rate is dropping across Japan, the populations are dropping across Japan, but the population is not dropping in Tokyo and other large metropolitan areas, Yokohama included, where I am right now. What that means, though, is that people are not only not having children, but they're moving to places where they do not have children. If you look at the birth rates in Kanagawa, Yokohama, and Tokyo, and other large cities, it is always consistently at the bottom of the statistics in terms of how many children people are having. And it's not hard to understand why. If you live in the big city, it's more expensive. Childcare is more of an issue because you don't have the grandparents, you've left them behind who would have been free childcare for you. And you're living in a rabbit hutch, a very small apartment with no green space, you don't have a garden or a yard. And it's not the type of place that's conducive to thinking you want to have children. And so I've always seen the two issues of the death of the countryside and the falling birth rate as going hand in hand. So while the countryside culture dies, the obvious question is, what is replacing it if everyone is moving to Tokyo? Well, it's really becoming just a big city related monoculture. It's becoming very homogeneous, basically. You're losing all the flavor and community of the countryside places, and you're trading that for Tokyo where there is no community. You don't know the people around you. Gone are the traditions of giving a box of soba noodles to your new neighbors to say, hey, let's have long, nice relationships while we live close to each other. You're likely to not even know who your neighbors are in Tokyo. So what that means is this loss of community. Everyone's come to Tokyo from a different place. You are basically at arm's length from everyone else. You don't know people, everyone's a stranger, and everyone casts away their original cultures when they move to Tokyo because they get rid of their local dialect. They take on the manners of the Tokyo people, which means to say a kind of bland and unoriginal, not very unique style of social norms. Basically, the culture in Tokyo is very thin. It's a very shallow culture. Everyone's trying to fit in, and the easiest way to do that is to go to the most bland and formal and kind of cold mannerisms to not risk any chance of standing out by having a different dialect, by treating people differently. And as such, I mean, I'm not... And I realize that it sounds like I'm really knocking Tokyo. I'm not. If you love Tokyo and you love living there, Tokyo is clearly a really awesome place. And I love visiting it. And I mean, obviously Yokohama is similar in that sense, although it still, to me, seems a little more rural, and I prefer it to Tokyo for that. So Tokyo is a very intriguing and wonderful place, but it's kind of sad that that is going to become, or that culture, the type of culture in Tokyo is going to become the main representative of what Japan is like. And anyone who's been to the Japanese countryside knows that Tokyo is not Japan. Tokyo is Tokyo. It is its own thing, just like New York isn't anything like Texas or Colorado. The difference, though, is that in America, people aren't moving to New York from Texas and Colorado in droves. And yes, I don't blame the people who do. I can't tell you how many students I've had in my classes who have said they prefer their hometown out in the countryside somewhere to Yokohama and Tokyo, but have gone on to tell me that in the next sentence that, well, they're of course going to live in Yokohama and Tokyo because this is where the jobs are. This is where they can have the type of career that they are interested in. So do I blame them for moving to Tokyo? Not one bit. But the fact remains they're discarding community for convenience and career. Yes, of course, you can have friends in Tokyo, but that usually involves getting on a train and traveling 45 minutes to an hour to where they are or to the place where you're going to hang out. And it's not really the same as, you know, getting together with your neighbors or with your friend down the street. But here's where I think that Japan is really failing itself when it comes to policy, the policies of corporations and the government. The fact that everything has to be in Tokyo and therefore everyone needs to move to Tokyo to be a part of things is really short-sighted in my opinion. The fact that the countryside is dying is not because no one wants to be in the countryside, it's that everyone feels they can't be in the countryside. They feel they have to be in Tokyo for their career, for their job. And it's literally the definition of putting all of your eggs in one basket. You're forcing everyone to these greater metropolitan areas. I know I'm talking about Tokyo mostly, but the same goes for larger cities like Osaka, Nagoya, places with industry where people can pursue careers like that, and they don't, rather than take over the family shop, the family craft, or heaven forbid farming, that kind of thing that many young people aren't interested in doing. I've said on the channel before that I feel like the government should put policies in place that try to encourage people, or not people, but encourage corporations and businesses to move out of Tokyo, to move back to countryside areas, first to help with the overcrowding issues in Tokyo, and to help the countryside continue to survive. I mean, of course that will cost money. It will cost corporations money to do this, and you'll have to have the infrastructure set up that you can move the businesses out and they remain relevant even though they're way out in the countryside. I realize that there's hurdles, but in the economy of today, it seems like those hurdles are possible to overcome, simply because in the modern day, working from home, telework, the way the infrastructure works that you can get around most of Japan very, very easily, I think makes it a possibility that should be considered. Because if Japan is really serious about its birth rate issue, then creating ways for families to feel like they can have more than one child would be a great initiative. The fact that no one really wants to have a ton of children in Tokyo because there's no space and it's super expensive, and getting them into the right school is a chore and everything else. As I said before, the issues go hand in hand. Basically, the birth rate being so low in Tokyo is not a mistake. It's not, oh, why is that happening? It's pretty obvious why it's happening. And if you're out in the countryside, if you get the corporations and you get the businesses to go out to the countryside, then you might be able to reverse not only this loss of local culture and local communities, but you can do what you can about the birth rate as well. Once people have a larger house and a yard and there's elderly people who are going to look after the children, it seems like a win-win-win all across the board. Now, I mentioned earlier that I would give some hope for what might happen, and it is true that there are more and more young people that are discarding the idea that they have to be in Tokyo, and they're moving out to the countryside, starting cafes and inns and taking over positions dealing with crafts and the making of traditional items. So it is happening, and I secretly hope that it will be something that actually snowballs as we move forward into the future, meaning it's very common for generations to reject what previous generations did. So the generations now are all about moving to Tokyo and following their career there in a big company and living in a little apartment and eating instant ramen late at night after their company life or their company workday is done. It might be that in the future, the next generation is going to look at that and reject it and say, okay, that's what my parents did, but that's not for me. And I think that that could be a real movement in the future. So, I mean, I guess we can hope, right? So when I say in the title of the video, Japanese culture is dying, that's what I mean. All of the diversity and beautiful culture of the countryside that is disappearing as we speak right now. It's something that I feel very passionately about reversing and doing what I can. And one of the things that I'm doing is making this YouTube video to begin with. I'm also working on an article that I'm going to submit to some of the newspapers here in Japan as an opinion piece, tying the birth rate issue and the dying countryside issue together. And I'm going to try to make it facts and research based and see if any newspaper will pick it up. And, you know, maybe it will be something that'll reach the ears of actual policymakers. But let us know what you think in the comments below. Let us know about your experiences out in the countryside and how that affected your views and your life versus your experience in Tokyo or the larger cities. If you're coming here as a tourist, I encourage you to get out into some of the less well-known places. If you want to pick up an interesting book, it's written by Alex Kerr called Hidden Japan, which might give you some ideas of places to go check out or find places similar to that. I'm actually going to be doing a book list video relatively soon, probably as a midweek video that I'll release in between my normal Saturday videos, where I talk about books that I would recommend about Japan, books that have changed my life in thinking about Japan, as well as, you know, helped me deepen my love affair with this country. So please look for that video. But mainly, I want to thank you very much for watching this particular video. I hope you enjoyed it, found something useful out of it. If so, please like and share the video if you would. Subscribe if you haven't already. I see that most people who watch my videos are not subscribed. About 75 to 80% are not subscribed. So please do so if you would. And, starting to get winded walking up this hill in the heat. So sorry if I sound a little bit odd, but at the end of all of this, I just want to thank you so much for watching this video and continuing to support the channel. If you want to support me directly, I have a Patreon that I'll link below. Check out my podcast, check out my Instagram, also linked below. And I'm running out of breath, so I'm just going to say goodbye for this week, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.